Chapter 6. I can't believe he didn't show up this morning. A distant voice barely filtered through the fog in my mind. Something tickled my nose, and I brushed it away. I heard some more mumbled words, but I couldn't make out all of them. I wanted to wake up, but I also wanted to sleep forever, and I couldn't do either. I thought we had gotten through to him, or at least that Nicker had. My nose kept itching, and my arm was under something heavy. You can't tell with these kids anymore, especially this one. When I say no one was home, I mean no one was home. We haven't been able to get a hold of his mom since Saturday afternoon when she picked him up at the station. In fact, one of his teachers called the station asking about Sean. She showed more concern about him than his mother did. I tried to burrow closer to the warm spot on my right. The blankets weren't very thick, but I was pretty comfortable, except for my right arm. Whatever was on it was so heavy I couldn't even move it. Well, I'll be damned, the voice said softly. It sounded a little closer this time. Hey, I wonder. Shh, softly. Look at those two, flopped together in the hay like a litter of puppies. The weight lifted off my arm, but I couldn't get the weight off my eyelids. I honestly couldn't have opened my eyes at that moment to save my life. Morning, Nicker. No need to ask if you're feeling better. Nicker nickered and my nose itched again. I felt Nicker leave, and all the warmth left with him. I reached up again to try to brush the straw off my face. Nicker came back and bumped my forehead with his nose. This time, my eyes flew open. The bolts of pain going from my head down my spine were unreal. I thought I was going to pass out again. Morning, Sean. The cop was grinning like an idiot at me. Mr. H wasn't grinning at all. If you need a place to sleep, all you had to do was ask. You don't have to sneak into a stall like a common thief. I didn't answer to either of them. I was concentrating too hard on not passing out again. At the same time, I was trying not to think at all because it just made my head pound more. Sean, are you all right? I knew I was making a face. I don't know. I kind of don't think I am. I blinked, trying to keep them in focus. I wasn't successful. The world went dark. When I woke up again, I was in a strange room, lying in a strange bed, wearing strange clothes. I sat up slowly and found a large glass of water on the table next to the bed. I drank more than half of it before I noticed a small bottle of pills with my name on it. The directions said 4 times a day, so I took one. The clock in the room was running, but I was sure it couldn't be right, because it said 2:30. I waited for a while, but that got old pretty quickly. I wandered down the hall and found my way to Mr. Hassler's living room. I had only walked through it twice, and I hadn't paid much attention to what was in it. I took my time, looking at all the old stuff he had. He didn't have much, so I figured what he did have must mean something to someone. There were 4 pictures of trains, kind of clustered together. A few feet away, a bunch of color photos of horses were tacked to the wall in sort of a collage. A couple of pictures had ribbons by them. One of the pictures looked just like Nicker, and I wondered if it was his brother or sister. On the opposite wall, there was an old black and white photo in a silver frame. There was a lady in it, standing in front of a small house. She looked happy, like she didn't have a care in the world. When I looked at the picture carefully, I realized she was standing in front of this house. It must have had some additions made to it over the years. The only other thing on the wall was a framed collection of some sort. Several medals and badges, a small bullet, and what looked like a piece of shrapnel were laid out on a neat piece of material and framed. The glass had a thick coating of dust on it. Sean, the doctor's not going to like seeing you up. I turned around. Why not? I'm fine. Mr. Hassler shook his head. No, boy, you're not. You've got a mild concussion and a nasty infection from a wound on the back of your head. Doc says we need to watch it carefully or it might spread. That'll be bad news as close as it is to your spine. Rubbing the bandage on the back of my head, I remembered the rusty nail in the hallway. Oh. Mr. Hassler watched me. I just watched him back. After a few minutes, he said, Go on now, get back to bed with you. But I've got work to do. We'll do it. You'll just have to get your hours later. I want to at least see Nicker. Good, he said. I'm glad you want to see him, but I'm afraid you're going to have to wait until tomorrow. I shook my head. If he really thinks I'm his mama, and if I spent last night with him and don't show up today, he's going to be really confused. He needs me right now. He may not need me tomorrow. We locked gazes. I will not look away, I promised myself. I want this. I'm going to have to be tough to get it. That means not looking away and not backing down. His eyes were the most unreadable pieces of blue ice I'd ever seen. I really didn't think I'd be able to bluff him into it. After an eternity, though, he agreed. Okay, I'll give you half an hour. I shook my head. I need an hour at least. 45 minutes. He cut me off when I began to speak. And you better take advantage of it now. I don't get generous like this very often. I turned around to go out to the stables, hiding my smile. There's a jacket by the door that'll probably fit you. That's okay. I don't need a jacket. Sean. The warning in his voice made me look at him over my shoulder. The expression on his face made me say, Okay, okay, I'll wear it. I had my hand on the doorknob when he said my name again, and I turned back to look at him. Would you like to stay here tonight? Yeah, I said, meeting his gaze. I would. You can call your mom when you get back from feeding Nicker. That won't be necessary, I said, slipping out the door. Hey there, Nicker, I said as I entered his stall. He got up, stepped quickly over to me, and butted me with his head. I laughed. You okay? I know I've been ignoring you all day, but at least I came to see you last night. He butted me again. What? You want something? You don't want this bottle, do you? You don't actually want to eat and get healthy and go beat up on all the other little colts and fillies that had the sense to be born on time, do you? He butted me 4 or 5 times during that little speech. Finally, I gave in. Okay, okay, here you go. He was eating like he did the first night, head and tail bobbing up and down in the same rhythm. When he finished, he blinked his eyes at me sleepily. I yawned back at him and sat down. He walked around me and laid down right next to me, putting his head on my lap. Nicker, I don't think you think I'm your mama. I think you're even more confused than that. I think you think you're a puppy. You're a horse, silly, and you're not going to be able to do this when you get big. Nicker didn't seem to care. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. After a while, I did too. When I woke up, Nicker was butting me again. I could almost hear him say, Hey, lazy, get up. I'm hungry. Someone had come in and dropped a blanket over me. They had also left me a pillow and a fresh bottle for Nicker, and they had left a can of Hawaiian punch and my pills. It wasn't too hard to guess who it was. I took my pill first, which wasn't easy, what with Nicker headbutting me all the time. I fed him again, folded up the blanket, and set it and the pillow on the overturned bucket outside my stall. As soon as I stepped out of the stall, I heard whistling. I went over to the next stall. Mr. Hassler was there, sitting on a stack of 2 bales of hay, polishing a saddle. He didn't even look up. Go on and wash up. James will be done fixing dinner in a few minutes. Then he did look up, with a grin that lit up his whole face. I thought I was going to have to come wake you, sleeping beauty. I grinned back. Nah, Nicker was too hungry to let that happen. He nodded. He's looking better. I think he'll be all right now. You don't need to sleep with him tonight. You'll do better in a real bed. You been here long? I asked casually. Oh, about an hour, he answered just as casually. Long enough to know you snore pretty loud. I'm surprised Nicker didn't kick you out of his stall. I laughed and started out of the barn. Oh, Sean, he continued. I turned back. I'm not going to make you tell me what's going on, but I can't let you stay here without you calling your mom. That's a real good way for me to get into trouble. I couldn't see his face because he was in the other stall, but I could tell that even though he sounded uncomfortable saying it, he meant it. Okay, I said. I'll give her a call after supper. Good enough, thank you. I left the barn and nickering and headed up to the well-lit house to wash my hands. Dinner was relaxed and easy. We talked about the work of the day. James gave me grief because I hadn't done any of it, and the work that had to be done tomorrow. Mr. H promised James I'd make up for it then. Oh, hey, I said suddenly. I can't. What do you mean? James asked. Today's Wednesday, right? Yeah? Well, that means I've got to go back to school tomorrow. This sucks. They're going to stick me in a room for 8 hours with nothing to do when I could be here with Nicker. So don't go, James said simply. Yeah, but then as soon as I do go back, I still have to serve my in-house suspension time. They won't excuse me from it. Actually, Sean, they've already excused you from it. I turned and looked at Mr. H. What? He shifted in his chair. I called your principal this morning and had a chat with him. And? And I asked if I could keep you here for the rest of the week instead of having you waste time doing in-house suspension. And he agreed? Yes. And I won't have to do any time in-house when I go back? Nope. I shook my head. I don't get it. I have friends whose parents have called and argued, and they still made them do the in-house. They never dropped it before. How'd you get them to drop it? Well, he shifted again. There's a catch. I knew it, I said, throwing back my napkin down on the plate. What's the catch? You'll have to stay on the ranch until you go back to school on Monday. The only other place you can go is your house. You need to be at one of those two locations at all times, and you must be with a parent or guardian. He paused. Those are court orders, Sean. I talked to the judge today. I could tell by the way he said it he was trying to warn me to take it seriously. I was thinking of something else. Can I just stay here? Sure. Before I could respond, he added quickly, as long as your mom or dad agrees. I bit my lip. James stood up. I guess it's time for me to do the dishes, he said, and began to clear the table. I'll give James a hand. Why don't you go in the other room and try to get a hold of your parents, Mr. Hassler said, getting up. I called my mom, even though I knew she wouldn't be home. I let the phone ring 20 times before I hung up. I just sat there and stared at the phone for a long time. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed 411. City, please, the operator droned. Fort Lewis. Name? Parker. S.J. Parker. I showed 3 S.J. Parkers. Is there one on Maple Drive? One moment, please. The recorded voice came on the line. The number is 468-9753. I hung up and stared at the phone some more. I really didn't want to make the phone call. I wouldn't even have considered it except, well, Mr. H had worked out a deal for me, and I wanted to be able to make good on it. But if I made this phone call, it would mean that in this week I had more contact with my father than I had in years. What do you say to a man you never see? One that you no longer trust or respect? I didn't want to tell him about anything that had happened in the last few days, but I knew I might need to explain some of it to him. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe he wouldn't even ask. But then again, he might. After all, he had shown up at school on Friday. I took a deep breath and dialed quickly. Hello? I froze. I knew I had dialed the correct number, but this was a woman's voice. She was giggling. Hello? Her giggling had slowed down. In the background, I heard a man's voice. Then the man took the phone. Hello? Who is this? Hello? The man's voice was harsh, demanding, angry. The man's voice was my father's. I hung up the phone.